Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our second installment of our 6-month Ladies Be Architects Heroku takeover. So we are spending the next, next 4 months talking about different Heroku topics. So a little outside of the traditional Ladies Be Architects pyramid, but we're really excited to be providing this content. We heard that a lot of you are interested in learning more about Heroku, so we are so glad you're here. And today we have a special guest from Heroku, straight from the horse's mouth, Julian Duque. So we're so excited that he is here with us, and I'll have him introduce himself in just a second once we get through some of these, our boilerplate slides. Of course, we would not be able to do any of the work that we do without our sponsors. So thank you so much to our platinum sponsor, Odaseva, and then our bronze sponsors, Capstorm and Southern Cloud. And with that, yeah, we'll just kick it off. So my name is Susannah. I am a co-lead of Ladies Be Architects. I am based in the United States. You can see the top flag on the screen. I'm based in the East Coast, so just outside of Boston. And I am originally from Colombia, from Bogota, Colombia. So that's the second flag that you can see. And what else about me? I'm a technical architect at Odaseva, which is an ISV of the Salesforce ecosystem. I have a bunch of certifications, and I have a dog named Parker. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll pass it over to Julian to introduce himself.
Okay, thank you, Susannah. My name is Julian Duque. I also live in the United States, in the Tampa Bay area in Florida. But I'm also originally from Colombia, but from the city of Medellin. So we share the same country. I pretty much, today is my first year working at Salesforce. I joined to work as a developer advocate for the Heroku team, and been working, pretty much this year, now more fully with the Salesforce Evangelist team, learning more about the Salesforce ecosystem, getting used to how to create applications on the Salesforce ecosystem. So I'm very happy to be here with you, sharing what I know from Heroku and expecting to learn a lot from you of what you know about Salesforce.
Awesome. And we're so happy to have you. So thank you so much for joining once again. And let's dive in on what we're going to be covering. So I'm going to be doing providing some slides, some key concepts around Heroku data and databases that Heroku supports. But the real, I think, exciting thing that we're going to be doing today is getting a real deep dive in demo from Julian. So we'll be doing that probably for most, like 40 minutes of the session. I'll just be providing the bookends, and yeah, we'll have hopefully some time for questions too. So with that, if you are new, if you saw maybe this listing on Twitter from a retweet from Heroku or something like that, just wanted to give some context about who Ladies Be Architects is. What we are a community group. We're not an official Salesforce community group, but we are sort of a really grassroots community-led group of 3 women. Our founder, Gemma Blizzard, is based out in the UK, as you can see. Charly Prinsloo is the other co-lead. She's based in Texas. And then you already heard a little bit about me, but we are, really this just started as 3 friends with a shared vision of studying for these certifications and ultimately pursuing our CTA. So it has been a wonderful effort. We have about, I think, 1,000 members and probably something like 4,000 engagement followers on Twitter. So it's been a really fun ride, and thank you all for joining today and for supporting us in general. The really exciting thing that happened last year was we also expanded into Australia. We have 3 wonderful Australian ambassadors. Vicky is on the phone today, and also Adrian and Emily are our lovely ambassadors in Australia. One final bit of sort of housekeeping business. We are improving our champions list process. So we usually recognize our champions at the beginning of every meeting. Until now, we've been doing sort of a really grassroots approach to our champions list gathering. We've been hearing about your amazing accomplishments on Twitter and then recognizing you. but we want to make sure that we don't miss folks. We know a lot of people post and maybe we don't see it. So we have a brand new shiny form, and we'll be posting this out online. But if you pass the certification and you would like to be celebrated, then we have a new form that you can fill out, let us know about it, and we will celebrate you and hopefully send you a little swag surprise as well. So with that, let's get started into the content of today's study session. So today, as I already sort of prefaced, we're going to be talking about the Heroku Architecture Designer exam. I took this exam probably about maybe 6 to 8 months ago, and it's a great one. It is a tough exam. There's a lot of content, and Heroku is a bit of a new topic for some folks that are coming from the Salesforce ecosystem, maybe know a lot about the platform. Heroku is its sort of own unique animal, unique beast, and it's really fun to learn about. That's what I found, but it is, like I said, it's challenging. There's a big, hefty exam guide. These are all the different topic areas that you need to know about in order to pass the Heroku Architecture Designer exam. Today, we're going to be talking about this data portion, which you can see is 17% of the exam. And we'll do a pretty good high-level overview of the different types of information that you need to understand. It's probably pretty small on the screen, but we're going to talk about all the different managed databases that are part of the Heroku data portion, so Postgres, Redis, and Kafka. And we'll talk a little bit about 2 other topics that fall underneath the Postgres header, I guess, which are Dataclips and then the concept of follower databases. And then you'll get to see those in action as well during our demo. Okay, so to do a bit of a segue between our intro to Heroku, which was last session, and then Heroku data, which is this session, we'll sort of start talking about the 12-factor app. So we talked all about this slide last session, but today, the way we sort of are going to segue into Heroku data is by taking a closer look at factor number 6, which is processes. So the concept of needing to have a database, and us coming from Salesforce, you're like, well, isn't the database is sort of baked into Salesforce? Why do we need to learn about all these different types of databases with Heroku? And the reason why is because factor number 6 talks about the fact that processes in Heroku need to be stateless. And when you execute your app and when you launch up your dyno, as we learned about last time, each dyno actually gets its own ephemeral file system. So the thing to understand and remember is that when you run your code, the cool part about Heroku is that you get the freshest copy of your code in your dyno that you spin up. But your dyno is going to restart every 24 hours. And this idea of ephemeral file system is really core to the 12-factor app. And if you have an ephemeral file system and a dyno that restarts all the time, you need to make sure that you have a place to store all your data, because your apps are, and the 12-factor processes that you're running are stateless and they share nothing. So databases and data in Heroku is all around that concept. It's making sure that you store the data you need so that your apps can do the cool things that you want your apps to do. So there are a couple of different flavors of what we'll call managed databases that Heroku provides. And the 3 different flavors are Heroku Postgres. That's sort of the most, I would say, the most common, and the one that if you've poked around a little bit on Trailhead and with Heroku Connect, you're already familiar a little bit with Postgres. Then the other 2 are Heroku Redis and Apache Kafka on Heroku, and those have really particular use cases. And as I can speak to the fact that in order to pass the exam, you definitely do need to be able to understand when you would choose one of these databases over another. So we're going to hit those highlights before we go into a demo. And as just an aside, these are the 3 managed data services that Heroku provides. And you also have the ability to use some, I guess, I don't know if they call them unmanaged, but additional databases like Amazon RDS and Amazon Redshift too. There's just some additional setup that you need to manage, and they're not as the nice part about these managed data services that Julian will probably point out to you guys is that it's super easy to spin them up, either via the command line or with clicks. And with the other databases, it takes a little more heavy lifting. So with that, let me make sure my slides are progressing. There we go. So let's very quickly, very sort of high level, let's talk a little bit about Postgres. So what exactly is Postgres? Well, it is a managed SQL database, and it is one of the core Heroku data services that folks use when you spin up an app, any simple app. And really, like I mentioned, if you've used Heroku Connect to sync data back and forth from Salesforce to Heroku, where you're storing that Salesforce data is in Postgres. So you've seen it. It's a pretty simple table-based, SQL-based database. It supports all of the languages that Heroku supports out of the box. So you can write your app and query the database using SQL, as you would suspect, with Heroku Postgres being a SQL-supported database. So two of the sort of unique Heroku concepts related to Postgres with Heroku are Dataclips is one of them. So Heroku Dataclips, as you can probably see on the screen, it might be a little small, but what you can do either with clicks or through the command line with Heroku is you can save your queries that you write and publish them out and share them either with, I don't know, if you're developing something, you could share your queries with your colleagues. You could share them with the public or via third-party tools. And this is how you can share out the view of your data, either in a browser or download it and work with the data that you've queried. So definitely encourage you to play around if you have an environment where you can leverage Dataclips. It's definitely a cool feature, definitely worth a try understanding how it works, and is a key concept in the Heroku architecture designer exam. One little free piece of advice is that Dataclips cannot connect to Shield databases. Last session, we talked a lot about the different types of Heroku environments, that there's Heroku private spaces, there's the Heroku common runtime, and there's also the concept of Heroku private spaces with like a Shield comparable security model. And if you are using Heroku Postgres, you can make sure that you have the right complementary Postgres addition to your Heroku runtime environment. And if you're using Shield, something to know, you cannot connect Dataclips to a Shield Postgres database.
Susannah, I've got a question from Rob. Are they static or dynamic, i.e. rerun on demand?
So there is some, I wonder if I have a slide about this, but there are some nuances. Definitely encourage you to read up on how they get refreshed. They're not always updated in real time, but there's a little bit of nuance about how often that view gets refreshed. And there's some really great documentation that I will put down. Maybe I'll put it in the chat while Julian's doing his demo on the nuance of how Dataclips get updated. But that's a really good question, Rob. Okay, so what else? The other key concept to know related to Postgres is the concept of a follower database. So one of the great powerful reasons that we use Heroku, and why Heroku is a great solution, is because it has really trusted availability. So even with non-high, there's a special product that you might want to know about called, there's a high availability product that Heroku Postgres does provide. But even with the sort of, maybe not the hobby, but the standard tier of Heroku Postgres databases, there is great availability. And one of the ways that Heroku guarantees and makes sure that your apps have great uptime is that they encourage using this sort of best practice of follower databases. And a follower is essentially a read-only copy of your leader database, and it stays up to date with that leader data. It's a read-only. So as you write to your leader database, any other changes are then streamed down in real time to the follower, and that follower is there and available in the case of a corruption to your leader database. You can sort of redirect your app to read from your follower instead of your leader database. So it's just another way to make sure that even if something happens, if there's outage, if your data gets corrupted for some reason, you can still run your app on Heroku.
Or you can also divide the use case pretty much. You have like certain queries that are going only to connect to the follower because they're just read-only, and the write operations to the main database. So you are not going to be doing everything on one single instance. So
That's
that
awesome.
would be some sort of scaling databases too.
Awesome. Perfect. So let's talk about, very briefly, talk about Heroku Redis and the reason why you might use it. So Heroku Redis is an in-memory key value data store, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. It's another one of the managed Heroku databases that are available. And again, it supports all the languages and frameworks supported by Heroku. It's a common, you'll see that in all of these databases. But one of the things that I had trouble with when I was studying for this exam, because I hadn't really had a use case for using Redis before. I understood Postgres. I'd worked with it a little bit in just my tinkering with Heroku, but I was like, what are the use cases for Heroku Redis? So on the slide here, you'll see some of the common use cases. And one of the things that I realized after studying and reading a little bit was the fact that, Heroku Redis is really a great complement for Postgres. You're going to leverage it for certain tasks. So if we remember that it's an in-memory key value store, 3 of the really common use cases for it are temporary queues. So if you have an example is if you had a long-running task, you're able to separate that long-running task from the normal request response cycle of the web server. Also session storage. If we're thinking about, another fun exam, the identity exam, and the concept of, all those crazy OAuth flows that you use. Well, where do you store that important information like tokens and things that you need to store to track the user session? Well, you can use Redis for that session storage. That's hard to say. And also caching. So, if you have data that needs to be accessed quickly and often, instead of doing a query back to your database, your Postgres database, you can cache some of that data. And that's really one of the sweet spots for Heroku Redis. And just one bonus example that I was thinking through as preparing these slides, a classic example of using multiple data stores in your Heroku application is like an e-commerce site. So you could have an e-commerce site that has that valuable financial information in a relational database like Postgres, while you might store your user session tokens for who's checking out and buying things and storing things in their cart. That could be accomplished via Heroku Redis.
And can I add another use case here?
Please.
Okay, you mentioned on the 12-factor app paradigm that pretty much applications are going to be stateless. So we have an application running on a dyno that is not going to keep a state, or the idea is to have the application itself stateless. But what if we need to share some sort of a state with the other dynos? Let's say we have that application running on 10 dynos, and we need to share those session keys with the other 9 dynos. So that's why we use Redis in this case. It's going to be a distributed in-memory key value data store. So all of the dynos are going to have access to the same memory space pretty much through Redis.
That's awesome. A great example. Okay, and our final managed database we'll discuss is Apache Kafka on Heroku. So if you're not familiar with Kafka, it was developed back in 2010 by LinkedIn. So it was their proprietary sort of pub-sub way to communicate and post events and consume events. But it's now used with a lot of different use cases. LinkedIn still does use it, but also it's a a really great way to have these log type events, this pub sub architecture, and a use case for Apache Kafka is are things like click interactions and log events. Again, think of anything. It is like a message bus, right? You have these producers and consumers. You're able to subscribe to topics, and there are partitions that group these topics. That's something that's really important to understand, the concept of partitions and topics and how that can affect the design of your app. But again, at its core, Apache Kafka is this distributed commit log. It's good for really really high volume communications, and really great for anytime you need strong durability and really low latency for billions or trillions of events and transactions. Anything to add on Kafka, Julian? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't mute. Yeah, I will show some examples later on Kafka. There's a question from Rob. Will you be able?
Oh yeah, I see it. So it is a separate. That's a great question. So it is a separate event bus. So the Salesforce event bus is separate from the Kafka on Heroku event bus, but they can consume, and maybe Julian could talk a little bit about this, but via the streaming API, you can actually republish events and push events from the Kafka event bus to the internal Salesforce event bus.
And we also release, it's in beta right now, we release a way to stream data directly from Postgres to Kafka. So all of the different Postgres operations, the inserts, updates, and deletes are going to be also streamed on Kafka automatically with this new beta integration that we have.
Nice. That's exciting. That's a good question, Rob. Thank you for asking. And any other questions, feel free to post them in the chat, you guys. We're going to transition now that we have a little bit of base knowledge. We're going to transition to a live demo and do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these concepts. So I'm going to stop presenting.
Is the Kafka part mainly for producing, or is it for subscribing also?
Both. It could be both, like both as a producer and as a subscriber, consumer. And in the demo I have, I'm going to show both cases, or how are we working here.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you, Susannah, for all this great introduction. You could be done better, way better than me, of course. So you give me the easy piece, which is showing a demo that I already had working. So I want to start from the beginning. Let's say we don't even have an Heroku application, and we need to start using these add-ons. So as Susannah mentioned, we have two ways of doing things in Heroku. You can use the dashboard, the website that we provide for you. Oh, I am on the wrong computer, sorry. I'm clicking different windows. Now this is my computer. Okay. So you all see my screen, right? Perfect.
Yeah, got a list of Heroku apps, yeah?
Yeah, a list of Heroku apps. That's what we want to see. So you have two ways of creating an app. You can go directly on using the dashboard here and create a new app and give in an app name, or you can go to the console. I'm going to be using the console a lot. So let me go to a folder, which is new. Here, we are going to create a new app, Ladies Be Architect. So this is going to create this app on Heroku. Now we should have that app listed here. And why we need the app doesn't have anything yet. We haven't deployed anything. It doesn't have code. But we need an app to be able to use the add-ons. So all of the different data products that we support are available through the Elements Marketplace. So you can go to elements.heroku.com. And here you can find the different add-ons, the official add-ons, Postgres, Redis, and Kafka should be somewhere in there. So you can add it directly from this website. You can also add it from the resources tab on your app. Quickly find the add-on you want to add. Let's say we want to add Postgres. Just click and do a provision, and it will add the Postgres support to your project or to your application. Now we have a PostgreSQL database instance that we can use both if we deploy an application on Heroku or locally. We can start deploying the developer application locally, connecting to the Heroku database, and that's not going to be any issue. So you can go to settings, for example, and here on reveal config bars, you have the connection string. So if you are using any graphical user interface to connect to Postgres, for example, like pgadmin, you can use this connection string to create a connection and start using the graphical user interface. Or you can use the CLI. So we also provide ways to not only create the add-on using the CLI, but also connecting to the instance we already created. So we are going to use the Heroku CLI with the PG plugin. And then here we can say, okay, give me info of the databases I have installed on my application. So it says that we have a PostgreSQL database is on the Hobby Dev plan. The Hobby Dev plan is free. You can use it. The only constraint is that it only supports up to 10,000 rows, but that's pretty enough for a prototype for an application that you are going to start developing. Then you are going to have like different layers of pricing depending on the number of rows. Then it's going to become unlimited, but now some other features are going to get into play here. For example, the follower option, which is very recommended for production databases. So that's how we created the Postgres. The Postgres it is available for us. We can also get that database URL from the Heroku config command if we need it handy somewhere, if we want to put it under the code to create a connection string. You can get it using also Heroku config. And if you want to connect to the PostgreSQL instance using the CLI, you can do Heroku PG PSQL. So this is going to do the full connection. You don't need to type the credentials. You don't need to do anything. And now you are on Postgres. Here you can do your queries. You can start creating tables, adding data, the regular SQL process here. Let me try. I think I have here a database script from a project that I can use. Yes, this is a database schema. Let me copy it and try to execute that database schema or that query here in my PostgreSQL instance. I paste the query. The query works, and I can run commands, \d. It's going to show me the relations or the tables, and now you can see the different tables I created, the tables for events with the different columns, and the table for members, for example. And now I can start doing SQL in here. This is not like a specific SQL talk, so I'm going to be avoiding doing insert, updates, and all that stuff. But now you know that you can easily access the database instance and start doing operations from the CLI. And you can also do it using Dataclips. We are going to be seeing Dataclips later when we have more data. This is just the very basics. I show you how to add an add-on using the web dashboard. Let's see how can we add an add-on or this data add-on using a CLI tool. In this case, we want to add Redis support to our application. So we are going to use Heroku, add-ons create, and then the name of the add-on, Heroku Redis, and the plan. It's Hobby Dev. And this is doing exactly the same. as if we were on the dashboard clicking on Heroku Redis. It's going to add a Redis instance into our application. If I run Heroku config, I'm going to have now, well, it takes some time, but I'm going to have another new environment variable, which is the Redis URL. It takes time, but it will appear. And, well, it is still creating. And also from here, I can connect to the Redis CLI. So I can do something like Heroku Redis CLI. Redis CLI, sorry, I need to type properly. And it's telling me, hey, be careful. Getting into a Redis instance on production might be super dangerous. Are you sure you want to proceed? So I say, yes, I'm sure I want to proceed. And now I am on a Redis instance, and I can start doing the different Redis operations, like set, let's say, my variable to ladies be arch, and now get my variable. And now I have a key value store database. So I can start like working with this. Rob says, hope Redis plans are not persisted, implying non-hobby ones are. Can you touch upon that briefly? I'm not exactly sure how the paid plans for Redis work. I can go and take a look on elements, and maybe if I can understand a little bit more about the different the difference with a premium plan.
Yeah, it's just more about if it's persisted, sort of where or how does it push it back to a
yeah, it's the main
Postgres or
difference is going
something
to
like
be connection limit and the persistence. It's going to be the main difference. So yeah, it doesn't persist. It means that when the dyno is going to get restarted, you are going to lose the data that it's in memory, but you can still use Redis as a temporary database.
Sure.
In this case, for session, key stores, for distributed state in the application, a state that is going to constantly change and it's temporary. And the data that you want to persist are going to live in Postgres in this case.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And Redis is a way more complex database that just having like a key value store. You can have like different data types, having hash maps, sets, being able to do some a lot of different operations for these types of data. You can create a variable, for example, with a time to leave option. Let's say this is going to live only for 10 seconds. I don't think. I think value, I think it's like that. Well, you can specify, let me. Key value X with the EX. I forgot. Oh, okay. So you can specify this value. For example, my bar, it's going to live only for 10 seconds. So if I'm going to get my bar right now, my bar is going to be value. But after the 10 seconds, that value disappears. So it's also very useful for catch data when you have like a time to leave. Store this session just for 30 minutes and you don't need to worry about the logic to delete information or running a cron job or whatever. Redis is going to take care of that for you. And this is just with quit. Perfect. Sadly, we don't have like a UI for Redis, so there is not like a dashboard so you can go and start interacting with our Redis database. But our add-ons both are going to have like a specific page when you can see the status of that specific resource. So here in Postgres, we see that we have a holiday plan. Pretty much nobody has been connecting to this database. We haven't done anything with this. So right now we don't have any any information in here. And if I go to Redis, I should get some status also about the service. Now it's going to show me the number of keys and the clients and the memory I have used, but still I don't have information to show in here. So now that I add, for example, these add-ons to my applications and they are available, let me see if now the environment variable is available. Yes. So I have the two different connection strings that I can use on my code, that I can start interacting with these two different databases. And I don't care about the language, or Heroku doesn't care about the language. If the language is supported, you can use any language you want. It can be Node.js, Ruby, Python, Go, PHP, Java. One of the supported language that we have, you can use these different data services. And as Susannah said, if you also want to use Heroku Connect, you will need to at least have a PostgreSQL database. So this is the basics. We saw how can we create the resources, how can we add the resources into an application. Let's jump into a real case when we use the different data services that we provide. I think the only one I'm not using is Redis for this specific project, but I can show you other project where we are using Redis to do basic pub/sub, because Apache, the thing with Apache Kafka is very powerful and production ready, but you can't use it for free. I mean, the basic plan costs $100, and sometimes when you want just to prototype an application, it's hard to pay $100. And you are not going to find an Apache Kafka as a service for free. So you will need to run a local version of Apache Kafka if you wanna do it. So for other application we are building, we are using a basic Redis instance as a pub/sub. Susannah mentioned that it can be used for doing like basic job queues and those types of operations. We are using Redis for that, and for the scale we need, it works great. But for the project that I'm going to show you, we decided to take the heavy production ready route and use Apache Kafka. So this was the demo we presented at TDX, the Salesforce, pretty much the Salesforce and Heroku. It's a demo we have been working called One Platform. How can we create a full application using both Salesforce Core and Heroku to create a full enterprise solution? So this demo tells the story of Pulsar Motors. This is an electric car company that it's creating new and amazing cars. Obviously, it's fictitious. And these new cars, obviously, they need to have like the latest gadgets. They constantly send information and diagnostic information back to the mothership. So all of these cars have sensors, and they are using an IoT protocol called MQTT to send all of the different messages. And then we are getting all of those messages on Heroku. We are processing those messages using the MQTT consumer, and then sending that data back to Apache Kafka to redistribute to the other applications where we need that data. Also, we are getting all of those IoT messages from MQTT through Apache Kafka, and we are storing the messages also on Postgres, because we want to have a history about the sensor reports. We want to have access from Salesforce to that data to create reports, to do some sort of AI to see if we can identify a battery malfunction, or we can identify problems with your car and be proactive. So we need to have a way to have this data accessible from Salesforce and data that lives specifically on Heroku. So we are also going to use Heroku Connect. So here we are using Apache Kafka, we are using Heroku Postgres, we are using Heroku Connect, and we are using a third-party provider. In this case, it's called Cloud MQTT, to do the IoT connection. So we are connected with that third-party provider to get all of this data into our pipeline and start working with it. Any questions so far before I start jumping into code and dashboards and seeing?
So Rob had a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to do the demo using third party to show the power of integration with other systems.
And I would just add that the IoT cloud, right, is actually built on top of Heroku and uses Kafka as well. So a lot of the under the hood of the marketed, right, IoT cloud is using a lot of these same patterns. So
Sure.
It's I'm bringing an existing working thing into the ecosystem. How can I integrate? How can I make that part of the full solution? So very good question. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you some code. It's in Node.js, just to have an idea. We don't need to focus too much on the code, but to see pretty much like the different parts that are doing the job. So here we have the project. It's called eCars Kafka, which is going to be all of the real-time part of our application. And here on the prog file, we can see the basic process we are using. We have one API. It's a Node.js server that it's going to be used to receive the sensor agent information. Let's say we are going to start a sensor. So we have an API for that. We are simulating this data. We don't have 1,000 of cars sending data out there. So we need to simulate this data somehow. We have another process. This is a worker on Heroku. So it is not a web application. It is a process that is running on the background called Postgres Writer. Postgres Writer receives the Apache Kafka message and stores that message into a Postgres table. That's the only thing that it does. Gets the message from Apache Kafka and store it on Postgres. We are not going to use the simulator. The simulator is a different process. Pretty much it runs a bunch of different cars. And sensor connector, it's the MQTT connector with Apache Kafka. So it's the one that is getting all of the different IoT messages from the cars and sending those messages through Apache Kafka. And now all of the different consumers that are getting those messages, one of those is going to be the Postgres writer, gets the message and stores in the database, and then we can add other consumers if we need them. So this is the applications we are going to be using today. Okay, let's now go to my project and let's go to that PostgreSQL database. So I'm going to show you the tables. I have two tables. One here is agents and the other is sensor data. An agent is going to represent one car sending data, and sensor data has all of that information for the car. So if I go and see my connected agents, I don't have any. And if I'm going to check my data, yeah, I have some data. Let's delete that data because I want this clean. Perfect. So I have everything clean right now. I don't have any messages flying. I'm going to simulate that one car is going to start sending data and storing this data into the database. So I'm going to do an API call to that server that I have running, the TDX20 eCars Kafka. I have an API method called agent start. I'm going to execute that agent start. It gives me one agent with one specific ID. This is simulating a car. And now I can go to my database and check again. Show me the agents. I have the agent I just created. So it was a database operation. And then show me the data. And I'm starting to get data. like the speed, the battery, and some other information that the car is sending every certain time. So we are getting data here slowly on our table. Let me go and take a look at the code really quick. So server, we had this agent start. That's pretty much the URL we are using to start an agent. So we get all of the different information. We start the simulator. This is the one that is going to start sending messages to MQTT. And then we stored that agent into the database. So that agent now lives in Postgres. So far, we have everything done in Heroku. We haven't done anything with Salesforce yet. But still, I need to have access to these agents on Salesforce, and I want to have access to that sensor data on Salesforce. So we are going to get there later. And the Postgres writer lives in here. This is the Postgres writer. It's a class that pretty much is getting that message from Kafka, the Kafka message, and transforming that message into a data that Postgres support and do the operation. Pretty much this is doing everything automatically for us. We are using a module or a library called SQLize Kafka Connect. Pretty much what it does is automatically gets a Kafka stream and store the information in Postgres. We are using libraries that are available on the ecosystem, so we don't need to write all of this code by ourselves. And if we see the connector, here we have the producer, which is the one that is sending the information to Kafka. We are sending information to a specific Kafka topic. So Kafka needs the different topics where people are going to subscribe to get information, or the clients or the consumers are going to subscribe to get information. So we have one specific topic for the data. It's called sensor data. And we are sending that data we are getting from MQTT or from the other means to Kafka. So that's the full connection in code. All of the information keeps flowing and flying. If we keep adding agents, we are going to get more and more data. Let's see if we have more here. Yeah, now we have a bunch of different sensor information. Let's go back to the Heroku dashboard. Now for that application that have the web, Postgres writer, and sensor connector dynos running. And I want to open the Heroku Postgres dashboard now to see how it looks like with real data. So now we can see that we have some statistics about the number of commits and the operations that this database is getting. And we can have access to the Dataclips. So now from the Dataclips, I can have queries that, as Susannah said, I can share with my teammates or publicly, depending of how I'm working. So I have here one, which is the test. Perfect. This is selecting the battery and the speed and the date from the sensor data, where the car I'm getting information is the Pulsar 1 Black, ordered by date. And the cool thing about this is that it gives me some charts automatically. So you can also have some sort of minimal reporting in here. Internally at Heroku, we use Dataclips a lot. We pretty much run most of our infrastructure also on Heroku, and our databases are Postgres databases, and we keep here customer reports, usage reports, a lot of different monitoring variables from other applications. So this is a product we also use a lot internally to have access to our database and sharing that information with others. Have all of my information in Postgres. We have Apache Kafka receiving the messages, but we need to see this information on Salesforce. So we need another add-on. It's not necessarily part of Heroku data, but I consider it a very important piece of Heroku, which is Heroku Connect. So I'm going to be adding Heroku Connect in here. And in order to use Heroku Connect, you need first to have access to a PostgreSQL database in your application. That's the first thing it's going to ask for. And second, you will need to have access to a Salesforce organization. So let's connect Heroku Connect with Salesforce. First, it's going to ask me about the database. So it detected that I have a database on my application. Perfect. Let's do next. Now it's asking me about, well, what environment and API version are you going to be using? Let's go with the latest. I'm doing authorize, and now it asks me for my Salesforce credentials. Let's use these ones. And that's it. I am connected. I have access to Salesforce objects, which are the ones that I can create on the mappings. But we don't need any Salesforce object in here. We need to give access to Salesforce to objects or information that I have on my database. Rob, does Connect work with Hobbitier Postgres? Yes, it works. You can use with Hobbitier. It has the same limitation, but you can use it to give it a try. Connect, it has a free version. Definitely. But what we need here is to use this feature called external objects. So with external objects, we are going to make available the information we have in our database to Salesforce. So let's go to external objects, click on create credentials, and this is going to give me some information to create external data source on Salesforce and share the different tables with my org. So I'm going to share agents and sensor data, those two tables. Okay, now let's go to Salesforce. So for me, it's easier to type force org open th live. So this is the organization I use to synchronize Heroku Connect. And the limitation here, I'm using a dev hub. You can only have one external data source. So it works for testing it. But if you want to add more, you will need to get a license. But here it's going to work perfectly for you. So I'm going to get to external data sources to start setting up the integration. Perfect. Now let's create a new external data source. Give it a name. Heroku Connect. And we need to select the Salesforce Connect OData 4.0. It is the same that somewhere in here, it's telling me that I'm going to use the OData version 4. I need this URL, so let's copy the URL. Let's go back to Salesforce. Let me move this here closer so it's easier. I add the URL. If you are going to use mapping and you are planning to update Salesforce objects from Postgres or from your Heroku database, you will need to enable the writable external objects to be able to have that bidirectional support. Otherwise, all of the Salesforce objects are going to be read-only. In this case, we don't need it. we are going to add it, but we don't need it because we are getting just reading the information. Okay. Now I'm going to select the identity type as named principal and then password authentication. Where can I find this? Let's go back to Heroku Connect, show credentials, and there you have your user and password. So let me add the user and the password. Perfect. I don't think I need anything else. Let's do save. I don't need to save this password. And now that I created the external data source, I'm going to do a validate and sync. And let's do validate and sync on the 2 tables we made available. And this will see if it works, we are good to go. Perfect, it worked. So now we have those 2 different external objects. Now we need to do, or you know way more than me, how to get these beautiful objects into a beautiful interface. I'm going to be doing the easy one, the one I know and it's fast. I'm going to create a tab for one of those custom objects. Let's do the agent.
And while you do that, Rob had a question that asking around if the username and password that you typed into the external data source is also from the config vars in your app.
No, that's specific of Heroku Connect. Those are not available on my app. Those are going to be available only on the Heroku Connect interface. And it's just for this connection. So normally you don't need those from your app. That connection is going to be done at the Heroku level, like at the platform level, not at the application level. For the developer, you just interact with Postgres. So you don't need to worry about how that data is getting into Salesforce. So this is going to be agents is my public object. Let's add a little computer. And obviously you can add like beautiful names, description, icons, proper interface. I'm going to be super facilist here and getting into the agents with this not very beautiful name. Let's go to show me all. I have one object. I don't know if that is my object, so I'm going to change the fields to display, and I have access to the name, to the profile, and I can now play a little bit with this. I think I can remove the display URL and save. And this is from my PostgreSQL database in Salesforce. And I can do the same with sensor data, and I will get a bunch of different variables. And now you can create reports. You can do all of the magic, you know, here in the Salesforce organization. And for the Heroku developer, they never knew about Salesforce in this case. They just follow the integration, click, and a couple of setup here and there, and now you have the data. So this is why it is very powerful. And one of the main use cases is the one I was mentioning earlier, is when you already have some sort of external solution that was created by another one or by a different team in your organization, and you want to integrate that with Salesforce. It's using it through Postgres and using Heroku Connect. So now I can keep having the IoT car sending information, and I can access that information here. Let me see if I can start a new agent with a different name. Let me see.
And I know we're already like a slight bit over time.
Okay.
But we'll keep going. I'm happy to stay a little bit. And
yeah, but I pretty much finished. Let's do this. Let me see if I send a specific agent called let's do this, and if I refresh, whoosh, it's warming here. There you go. I have it. So now I'm getting that information, and it's real time and synchronized. And that was all from me. Thank you very much for this humble demo. I hope you liked it and learned about a bunch. And if you have any questions, please let me know, or you can follow me on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to reply in there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is, I love that the demo that you shared, I think illustrates one of the things that I learned while studying for this exam, which is you start to see how all of the different domains, if any of you have been doing the other certifications, like with integration and the identity exam, like all of those different domains really start to come together when you are using something like Heroku with Salesforce, because you have to start to piece together like the things that Julian showed on the screen, like thinking about how do you connect, or using OAuth, or using like a password or a named principal. All those concepts really start to come together. So it's definitely a fun exam to study for if you are thinking about it. I highly recommend it, and highly recommend checking out Heroku in general, even if you weren't thinking about studying for the exam. So I know that we are already over time, but I just, again, wanted to thank you so much, Julian, for coming, for doing the awesome demo, for spending the evening with us. And all of you, definitely encourage you to follow him on Twitter. He puts a lot of great content out there into the ecosystem. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know that we're a little bit over, but on the screen, you'll see the Heroku Architecture Designer Trail that has a lot of good resources. We're also posting all of these study sessions that we're publishing on the Ladies Be Architects YouTube channel. So that is where you will be able to view this recording later. It's on our website as well, so ladiesbearchitects.com. And I think with that, yes, thank you all. Thank you for joining and spending an hour with us this evening, this morning, whatever time it is for you. And we'll have some more awesome Heroku content coming in the following months. So again, thank you all for joining. The recording will be posted online, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.